first sort of small tactical question I can answer is whether sending in an expression of interest commits you to an application. No, if you send in an expression of interest, you don't have to put in an application. Of course, we'd love the application to be in, but getting expressions of interest in gives a good idea, lets us contact you with tips and other things that will actually help you get through with an application in the end. So there is a question that I will direct to Kelvin, knowing that Kelvin is one of the past winners, how has winning the scholarship changed your career and the careers of other winners like Tian Yi?
Well, I might have a bit of difficulty speaking on behalf of Tian Yi, but I can honestly say that I wouldn't be where I am now in my career if it weren't for having applied for and won the William Ah Ket scholarship all the way back in 2018. So I first wrote that paper with my colleague back in 2018 when we were both graduates fresh out of law school. After copious blood, sweat and tears, our entry was shortlisted and it felt very surreal. We were flown up to Sydney. We heard from President Margaret Beasley of the New South Wales Court of Appeal, as she was then. And shortly thereafter, we were kind of stunned. We had to prepare speeches when we were for sort of if we won the scholarship, and didn't think we'd have to have recourse to them. But having just accepted a $3,000 check from Patrick Ibbotson of Maddox, I kind of felt obliged to show up to a national roundtable that was occurring the next day. But when I got there, I actually was surprised to be in the same room as a number of other passionate, engaged individuals who are very knowledgeable about the topic of cultural diversity and diversity and inclusion more broadly. From there, my involvement sort of snowballed, joined the Victorian committee, was heavily involved in student engagement in particular, being a relatively recent graduate, and have sort of published articles in the Young Lawyers Journal. I'm a part of the Law Institute of Victoria Diversity Committee, and also do D&I work at Norton Rose Fulbright behind the scenes. I think this scholarship pushes you and encourages you to expand the boundaries of sort of thought leadership in cultural diversity. It forces you to reflect on yourself, and I'm really grateful to have been a part of this journey.
Cool, thanks for that, Kelvin. I think I can definitely echo that. It's definitely changed the trajectory. In terms of there's another little tactical question around where we can access previous winning and runner-up papers. They are on the AALA website. If you go to the website, there is a tab that is for the William Ah Ket Scholarship. And in there, you'll have information of the history, as well as information on the topic for this year, how to apply, criteria and eligibility, as well as then a section where you can see winning and runner-up papers from previous years. And get ideas and inspiration from there as well. Obviously, with this year's paper, there is a different topic to what was in previous papers, but definitely the inspiration will be the same. In terms of another question, I might direct this one to William Lye. So we've heard from William that he's been here from the infancy of the scholarship to today, where it's a running scholarship reaching across the nation. How have you seen the conversation around cultural diversity and inclusion evolve over the course of the scholarship?
Thank you for that question. I think what we have set out to do is to firstly to recognize the legacy of a barrister who was well ahead of his time, William Ah Ket, and as you've heard the Chief Justice say about his challenges, being a person who probably is the single only person in Victoria, and certainly at the Victorian Bar, practicing as solely and predominantly as a barrister. So by creating this scholarship, we have sought to use the scholarship to encourage the conversation between younger generations of lawyers, those up and coming, our future leaders in the profession. And what we have seen is that it has created a momentum, not just within the Asian Australian diaspora included, but it has also encouraged other background or lawyers of different background to come together to find a place in which they can contribute their skill set, talent, and the opportunity is there for anyone to participate. And I'm reminded of the saying is that if you want to see the view, you have to climb the mountain. If you don't climb the mountain and remain in the valley, then you're not going to appreciate what's beyond where you can only see. But to climb the mountain takes effort. And one of the things is that people ahead of us have taken some steps to carve up that pathway to the peak of that mountain. Now, it may not be perfect. It may be just some trees being cleared. And in time, the next generation of hikers who want to see that view will then create that gravel road and eventually a nice bitumen road that will go all the way up to the top of the mountain. It still needs to take somebody who is prepared to do that. And I think the Asian Australian Lawyers Foundation took that initiative to provide that avenue. And I'm pleased to see that the conversation broadly among the profession has increased in terms of thinking about equality, diversity, inclusion. So it can only get better for the entire profession.
Thank you, William. We have a question about advice on how to, for participants in the scholarship. I might direct that back to Kelvin again as a past participant. Maybe he has some tips of how to get through with an application and what might be a formula for success, if you like.
Sure, happy to provide some high-level tips. I'll start with the boring administrative one, being time management. Don't leave writing the paper until the last minute. It's a process, it's arduous, it takes time, it evolves. So make a start and then see where it goes from there. The second would be do your research, in that you don't want to be reinventing the wheel, covering ground that's already been covered. Yes, you want it to be well supported, but at the same time, I think it's necessary to bring something of yourself. In that vein, don't be afraid to take a stance or a position and defend it. So even if it's not the right answer, and I think it's questionable whether there is indeed a right answer in many circumstances, so long as it's well reasoned, then I think judges will look upon it favorably. My penultimate tip would be go where the path takes you, in that it's great to have an idea of what you want to write initially, but often after reading, drafting, amending, further redrafting, the end product isn't what you initially had in mind, and that's fine. I think your understanding of the topic and subject matter of your essay will evolve throughout the process of writing it, and that's something that should be encouraged and indeed embraced. The final tip I have would be don't be afraid to have a go. Perfect is the enemy of good. So I think you can sort of write and rewrite all you want, but at the end of the day, I think so long as you're bringing something new to the conversation, then you're making an invaluable contribution to the discourse regarding cultural diversity and diversity inclusion more broadly. And that's a good thing in and of itself.
Thanks for that, Kelvin. I think everyone can echo about the time management piece. It is an enemy for many of us, and probably a good tip for success as well as all the others that you gave. I might invite Molina to answer this one. There is a question on, as an Asian female lawyer, what kind of common issues you might have seen in the to the female gender diversity and inclusion piece that you've seen in the common theme here with cultural diversity and inclusion, which is the subject of the scholarship.
I guess I always speak about it as a double glazed glass ceiling that women of color face. So you've got the issue of gender diversity, but there's the cultural diversity aspect to that as well. I guess in Australia, when we talk about culture diversity, we always tend to focus a lot on the cultural diversity aspect, but we tend to we talk about the gender diversity aspect, but we tend to ignore the cultural diversity. And when it's these layers that are added, that intersectionality becomes really important to understand. And that's where I feel sometimes that organizations do not look at particular issues of perhaps women of color, or women of color. And I think sort of see some of the barriers become exacerbated for women like us. And I think, I mean, a lot of it is, if you're especially if you're in at the entry level, I feel it's manageable. As you keep going up in the higher up in leadership, that's where I feel a lot of the issues with the bamboo ceiling kick in as well, because you have these, there's really not much scope for going up further. That's for women generally, and then for women of color, it becomes extremely hard. I think it would be really interesting if someone was willing to explore some of those barriers and how they can be overcome as well, looking specifically at the issues of women. And I'm being a woman myself, color, so a lot of times, even on boards that I sit on, people speak over me. The same thing, if a white man says the same thing, it always has more credibility and everyone will say, yes, great. But if a woman of color says that, you're kind of spoken over. So those kind of issues always exist. I think we look at the gender issues and then add on that layer of color. So yeah, I guess that's what I want to mention.
Thank you, Molina. Definitely, I think it's got intersectionality is always across a lot of the diversity inclusion space.
Mm.
We might just have one more question before we formally close. I might direct this one to Kelvin. The question is, which resources assisted you the most in the research you actually conducted for writing your paper?
So in terms of the resources that we drew upon, a lot of it was legislative in nature. So looking at, for instance, anti-discrimination legislation, which provides a solid basis for, or existing basis for opposing racism, sexism, and other forms of discrimination. An interesting one that Chen Yi drew upon in writing her paper about diversity intelligence was the obligations to which we are subject as legal professionals, being the legal profession uniform law and the sort of compulsory CPD requirements thereunder. Another thing I think it's good to draw upon is, well, I think we as lawyers have a tendency to focus solely on the legal aspect, but the problem of racism and those other problems to which I've already alluded is far broader than one that can be approached solely through that legal lens. So it's helpful to draw on other fields for comparables, looking at, for instance, professional services firms and some of the research conducted in those other fields, including sociology. So I think there were some reports off the top of my head regarding the impact of, for instance, having a culturally diverse family name on the prospects of an application making it to an interview, or the competitive edge that is brought by a diverse applicant pool. So my advice would be to read far and wide and then sort of pick out the relevant bits that fit into the narrative that you're trying to tell through your paper.
Thank you, Kelvin. I'm sure people will tactically take that on board as they're picking it up. I can't see any further questions. I think what we can do is formally close for the night. What we want to let you know about as well is that in about September, October, we will have hopefully an in-person event. Hopefully we're out of any sort of snap lockdowns at that period. And the idea then is to award the winners and the runners-up. And that also provides us a great opportunity to network with each other and press these kind of ideas and push these kind of conversations. If you have any questions in the meantime, there are definitely channels in which you can go and ask them. One of the main channels is to send us an email at scholarship@aala.org.au. Generally, if you have any other questions, they can probably be answered from looking at the website as well. Tactical things about how to apply and what's the process are all on our website at aala.org.au. And you'll see the button for William Ah Ket Scholarship there.